Welcome back to another division breakdown episode. Today we are breaking down the AFC West, home of the reigning Super Bowl champions, and we'll see what happens this next season. Chase, this is it's a division that has been dominated by the Chiefs recently, 7 straight division titles. Before that, it was the Denver Broncos, 5 years. There's been a reign that hasn't been one of the more competitive divisions, I guess I'm trying to say. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out, if the Chiefs are able to reign supreme again, or if maybe one of these other teams will start to emerge as a real threat here to the division. But excited to break it down here and dive in. If you're catching our division breakdown series, we're in our final breakdown series, right, of the AFC West, following another video of the NFC West, where we're breaking down each team individually, giving our thoughts on each, and then giving our prediction of the final standings at the end of the regular season, ranking 1, 2, 3, and 4, how we think it's all going to play out. But let's go ahead and get started. We each got 2 teams to give our analysis on. Chase, so we'll go ahead and start with you. Which team you got for us here?
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with the LA Chargers, right? So they have a very interesting team because if you remember to last year to challenge Pat Mahomes, to challenge the Chiefs, right? Last offseason, the Chiefs got really bad. They got worse. They lost everyone. It's a rebuilding year for Kansas City, and all of these other teams got better, right? They were supposed to challenge. Plays out the same that we have seen for years, right? Pat Mahomes dominates, the other teams falters. But unlike those other 2 teams, the Chargers had something happen. They have, and they've had for a long, long time, injury problems. They are a very good team, but their stars, even their role players, they can't stay healthy. Keenan Allen's been injured so long that I don't even think he's just a shadow of what he used to be, how dominant he used to be. Mike Williams flashes, and then he's out for a couple of games. Justin Herbert actually tore his cartilage in his rib cage week 2 in that amazing Thursday night football game, and he played almost every game with that torn. Right, Joey Bosa got out. Rashawn Slater, their really, really solid tackle, he got out and it was replaced. Corey Linsley was hurt for a couple games. They just cannot stay healthy. Derwin James, for some odd reason, this is his first year that he actually stayed healthy. He showed his full potential. But this team has a little bit of problems outside of that they kind of addressed here. Right, they had a problem with their wide receivers. Like I said, Keenan Allen, his injuries has knocked him down a couple notches from where he'd been. Mike Williams can't stay healthy. So what did they do? The first round, they went out and drafted this unicorn of a player, Quentin Johnston from TCU. We all seen what he could do in the college football playoffs. And then they went and they drafted a middle linebacker, Davion Henley from Utah State. I think that's wrong. Actually, I think it's supposed to just be Utah. And he was a former wide receiver, turned middle linebacker, fast on his feet, a coverage guy. And that wasn't enough for him, right? They've been reaching for a middle linebacker forever because they did lose Drew Tranquill. And then they still have Kenny Young that they traded up to draft in the 2020 draft. But he just wasn't cutting it. So they brought in Eric Kendricks to mentor these young middle linebackers, right? Kind of show them the ways. And then something that surprised me with their team is I think they still have a hole they didn't address with either free agents or in the draft, and that is Nasir Adderley, their free safety. They drafted him in 2021. He was one of my favorite players coming out of Boston College. He actually retired this year at the age of 25, right? He just said he was injured. He had some of that Chargers injury bug. He said, I'm done with football, walked away when he still could. I feel good for him. I'm glad that he did that, but it left kind of a key piece there at free safety that they're going to have to kind of watch. I think the biggest addition for this Chargers team is they actually brought in Kellen Mond, who kind of got the blame for the Cowboys playoff woes, even though I don't think it's on him. I think he's a great offensive coordinator, and I think he'll help unlock this dink and dunk offense that they have been using, kind of unlock it down the field with the helps of Justin Herbert's arm, which we know is a top 5 arm in the league. Whether you believe he's a top 5 quarterback or not, you can't deny that. And then the addition of Quentin Johnson will hopefully open up this team that we won't have to see this crumble that they did in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, no, I mean, you nailed it really right on the head. I mean, honestly, I just feel like as long as I've been alive, like the Chargers have always had really good, if not elite talent. They just haven't been able to put together. I mean, you look at our youth growing up, right? Philip Rivers obviously was never like a top quarterback, was still good, right? One of the better quarterbacks growing up. Obviously, the Danny Thompson, obviously Antonio Gates, right? They've had these historic players that they just haven't been able to put together. You're looking at now, who do they have? They brought in Khalil Mack. They have Joey Bosa. They have J.C. Jackson. They have Derwin James. They have Justin Herbert. They have all these like names that just pop out of the page to you, right? Like on paper, like man, these guys should be dominant, and just for multiple reasons, right? Obviously, injuries are a concern. I think head coach. I think Brandon Staley is the problem for the LA Chargers, right? His questionable decisions, right? We saw it where he made questionable decisions about going for it on fourth down, fourth and short, on his own territory, things like that, putting his team not really in good positions to win, and then putting his players out there. Mike Williams had injury concern last year. He started and played him in a game that did not matter. Did not matter if they won that game. It did not matter if they lose that game. They put Mike Williams out there. He gets injured. He's out. Just very questionable concerns for Brandon Staley as a head coach. Honestly, I think that would be my biggest concern as a Chargers fan, or just looking at it in general for the Chargers. They've got the talent there. Obviously, they need to stay healthy. But I think their biggest Achilles heel is honestly their head coach and Brandon Staley. I was surprised especially after that playoff meltdown against the Jaguars last year. I was surprised he stuck around. I thought for sure, honestly, I thought for sure what the Chargers were going to do is they were going to get rid of Brandon Staley, and I thought they were going to be the ones to bring in Sean Payton. I really thought that was going to happen. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. Instead, they scapegoated Tom Lombardi. They got him out, and they brought in Kellen Mond here, which I think is going to unlock something in Justin Herbert that we have not seen before, and that it's just going to be 40-yard passes like every other play. Like he's going to air it out. They've got the receivers to do it. Quentin Johnson's going to be a stud. Mike Williams, Keelan Allen obviously are already studs. If they can stay healthy, right, on both sides of the ball, they're going to be a problem. My concern, right, like I said, Brandon Staley and their secondary. I don't think they've done enough to get really much help in their secondary. And so that's obviously what has burned them every single time they played the Chiefs, and just what has burned them just by anybody, right? Is their secondary is not very good. When that pass rush doesn't hit home, their secondary is not good enough to bail them out. I guess what I'm trying to say. So those would be the two biggest areas of concern that I have. But one thing I don't have a concern for is Justin Herbert. I think Justin Herbert is going to light the league on fire this year, and I think a lot of people still are out on him. Surprisingly so. And I think this year he just flips that narrative 120%.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Right? I think I like the head coach a little bit more than other people, even though he's a defensive guy. He's a lot analytical. Normally, he drafts pretty analytical and does what the numbers tell him to do instead of what his feelings tell him. That tends to get him in trouble a couple times. I can overlook that a while. I think I blame a lot of the playoff loss on their running back situation. Austin Eckler, great fantasy wide receiver. You've all heard me say it. Dude has not had 20 carries in any game. He's not a workhorse. He's a scat back who wants to be paid. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't bleed the clock, right? So that I think that kind of hindered what Brandon Stanley could call, what Tom Lombardi could call last year. They did bring in Isaiah Spiller. He got hurt last year. They brought him in the draft last year. Hopefully he can stay healthy a little bit. They have that running back, Dotson, I believe it is, that's lighting it up in preseason right now. Hopefully that can stay. But I think it's crazy the amount of hate that Justin Herbert. It's like we forget that he was second in the league in passing yards. Like the dude was on fire playing injured with nobodies, right? I think DeAndre Carter and not Palmer,
James
but
Palmer.
the other was it Joshua Palmer? I think he got hurt during the game. Then DeAndre Carter came in as his number one. He had some guy from Oklahoma State or something like that catching passes I've never heard of. I mean, he just did it with a bunch of nobodies, kind of. So I've got mad respect for Herbert.
No, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, obviously, as the division rival to the Chiefs, I don't like the Chargers. I love Justin Herbert coming out of college, and I was so ticked off whenever the Chargers got him. I was like, dang it, because I want to root for the kid so bad, but can't root for the Chargers. So sometimes it's tough. But I love the kid. I think he's a great player. I think he's going to have a great season, hands down.
Yes.
So I'll give you my first team here. It's going to be the Denver Broncos. So the Broncos have had somewhat of a more quiet offseason, right? player-wise, right? Obviously, the Broncos were, the biggest offseason acquisition, right, was getting Sean Payton as the head coach, right? So besides that, obviously, they're in the headlines for sure. And obviously, Sean Payton with his comments of putting them more in the headlines. But as far as player-wise, right, they didn't really get many big splashes, right? Obviously, last year they were the talk of the offseason, kind of like the Jets are this year because they got Aaron Rodgers. Well, they traded the farm last year, right, for Russell Wilson, and that didn't work out. Whether it was Nathaniel Hackett, whether it was Russell Wilson, whether it was the combination, whatever it was, whatever plan that they had, it just did not come to fruition. It did not work out. Management said this is going to be a head coach problem. We still believe in Russ. We believe he can play like he did in Seattle. This was a one-off season. They booted out Nathaniel Hackett and they brought in Sean Payton. Sean Payton's going to come in. He's supposed to fix the offensive issues, fix the team issues, get Russell Wilson back on his feet and playing like he was in Seattle. Is that going to happen? Time will tell. But that was, the biggest offseason move that they did. Player-wise, though, they were kind of quiet, right? They got quietly better on offense, offensive line and defensive line, right? They brought in free agent Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers to shore up the offensive line, and Zach Allen over from the Cardinals to come in. They let interior defender Jermont Jones leave and sign for Seattle. And they got in Zach Allen. Zach Allen has been way more productive, and they're going to get Zach Allen cheaper than they would have had to pay for Jermont Jones and what he signed for in Seattle. So quietly getting better on offensive line and defensive line. We'll see how that shakes out. It looks like so far in the preseason, there's been a little bit shaky on the offensive line. So we'll see if that irons itself out. Other than that, another good couple picks or signings that I liked was quarterback Kyle Fuller and running back Samaje Perine came over from the Cincinnati Bengals. Perine was dominant whenever Joe Mixon was out, and so that's going to be a good solid depth for the Broncos, right? Something that really the Broncos struggled with was when Javonte Williams got injured. He's a fantastic running back, super underrated, I think. But because, obviously he got injured, he wasn't able to continue with the season. So now he's coming back. So just, not maybe necessarily injury prone, but just adding some depth there at the running back position. Their wide receiver room, is still good, right? They still have Jerry Jeudy. He hasn't really been what we thought he was going to be coming out of Alabama. Whether that's the quarterback's fault or whether his fault, like he's led the league in drops or close to it in drops, right? He just hasn't really been that star player that we saw in Alabama yet in the NFL. Tim Patrick, unfortunately, goes down again, this time tearing his ACL. He's done for the season. So just unfortunate there for the Broncos when it comes to wide receiver room. Their defense, so sticking on that, that's why they drafted Marvin Mims in round 2 from Oklahoma. Super stud at Oklahoma, so he had to come in there. On defense, Drew Sanders, who I really liked, the linebacker coming out of Arkansas, and Riley Moss, the cornerback out of Iowa. So we'll see how he holds up in the next level for the obvious reasons, of course. But I think Javonte Williams is going to be on offense what helps put this kind of offense back on course. Obviously, we'll wait to see what Russell Wilson does. That's a big piece, but I think Javonte Williams will help him out. Courtland Sutton he really flashed about 2 years ago, and then just through injury concerns as well, he just hasn't really been able to put it all out there. So it's tough. It's kind of like we said with the Chargers, right? So even on the Broncos, right, their star players on offense, keep suffering injuries. That kind of keeps holding them back. Their defense, right? Their defense has been a top defense here for a long time now. Really, they've really just been what we would call a quarterback away for a long time now. Right? Ever since Peyton Manning left, they just have not been able to figure it out at the quarterback position, no matter what they've done. And the jury's still out on that to see if Russell Wilson is going to be the guy. But they've got Patrick Surtain back there holding it down. I'm not too worried about their defense. I really like what their defense has, but it's all going to ride on the shoulders there of Russell Wilson and that offense. Are they going to be able to put it together to score games? Because honestly, the defense kept them in so many games last year. Like the Broncos just needed to score. It was like, just score a touchdown. Just score like one touchdown and you win the game. Just one touchdown and you win the game. And the offense just could not do it. So zero concerns about the defense. It's all going to be on that offense. We'll see what Sean Payton is able to do. Is he going to be able to work some sort of voodoo, magic, wizardry out there? I don't know. I'm not buying into it. I don't think he's going to be the savior that's going to come in and fix everything. I don't believe Russell Wilson is completely washed, but I don't know. I'm not confident enough to say that last season wasn't necessarily a fluke, and that there's going to be issues still moving forward here for the Broncos on offense this season.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, right? That defense, you mentioned Pat Surtain. I believe he's the best cornerback in the league. I think that guy has, people on lock, right? You cannot throw towards Pat Surtain. They had the emergence of Brian Browning. I think that's the name, Bruce Browning. The outside linebacker from Ohio State kind of took over for Bradley Chubb, allowed them to move him for the first round pick that they traded for Sean Payton. I think that adds pressure when any coach comes in and gets signed as a first year coach, there's pressure. When you have to be traded for a first round pick, when your team traded two of them away to get a quarterback that underperformed, I think that just quadruples the pressure. I think the pressure is going to collapse, and I do not believe in the savior for the Broncos. And I honestly think that a lot of what we attributed to Russ on the Seattle, I think that was a lot of Pete Carroll. We'll talk about him at another episode, but man, I think even we've seen it with Geno. I think Pete Carroll was the secret of Russ's success. He got a big head, and now he's kind of fending for his own and trying to see if he can still make it. So whoever let him cook, needs to put him back away.
Yeah, honestly, I think the season just started off on the wrong foot, where it was that fourth down in Seattle, right? Russell's return to Seattle, week 1. Crazy story, right? And it was like 4th and 3 or 4th and 5, something short like that. Instead of opting to put it in Russell's hands and Cook to go for it, they opted for some super long field goal. And obviously they missed the field goal. They were short on the field goal and they lost the game. I just think that set a bad precedent moving forward, that maybe Hackett and the offense did not really have that faith in Russell Wilson that he could be that guy, and it just kind of snowballed there pretty quickly there after week 1, right? And they just never got it back on track. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if they're able to figure it out, and only time will tell. But what's your next team that you got here for us, Chase?
Yeah, my next team is the Las Vegas Raiders, right? So let me take you back to last offseason, right? The Raiders lose a wild card weekend off of a weirdly called touchdown play, right? The Bengals beat them. They blew the whistle. Raiders players stopped. The touchdown, they counted it anyway. They beat them by 4 points, right? Flash forward to the offseason. They think, hey, that Bengals were just in the Super Bowl. We had them if it wasn't for the refs that messed up. We just need that extra step to take us over the edge. Derek Carr calls his college roommate and says, hey, the best wide receiver in football, Devontae Adams, come over here. We can make it to the Super Bowl. They get the deal done. They bring him over, right? All is good. The season starts, and it doesn't work. It's just a huge disappointment. The Raiders never get rolling. They brought in Josh McDaniels from the Patriots, and just like he did the previous time he was head coach, he failed to get anything going, right? This guy just kind of took this team that was kind of trending up, right? Gruden had made some really dumb mistakes in the draft, drafting Clean Farrell and all those first-round whiffs that he's had over the years, trading Amari Cooper, trading Khalil Mack. And it was just starting to look on the bright side for him. And then last year happened. So what did they do this year? Well, during the season, they parted ways with their franchise quarterback, right? And he give it what you say. Derek Carr was their franchise quarterback. They parted ways with him. I think they did him really bad, right? I don't think they treated him very well at all. He wasn't the problem. They brought in Jarrett Stidham, who they also let walk, right? And then they paid $72 million for Jimmy Garoppolo to come in, right, to fix all of their problems. They traded away Darren Waller, who was one of the few players that wanted to be there and believed in the Raiders organization. They traded him away to the Giants, but they brought in Jacoby Myers from the Patriots, right? So he can fill that role. They let Foster Monroe walk when he had diagnosed with cancer. Apparently he doesn't have it anymore. He overcame it, or was a false alarm. I'm not sure on that, but he signed with the Saints. So hopefully he's cancer free. I know there was a scare of lymphoma there. They also brought in Austin Hooper then to replace Darren Waller. Makes sense, right? Except they're going to spend their second round pick on Michael Myers, right? You're paying Austin Hooper a lot of money, bring in Michael Myers. Why'd you need Austin Hooper, right? Michael Myers was the most pro-ready tight end we've seen in a while, right? He wasn't anything special. He wasn't Kyle Pitts level, but they said this guy can block, this guy can catch, this guy can run some routes. He's ready to plug and play. They bring in Austin Hooper anyway. They signed Marcus Peters, who had his heyday in Kansas City, won a Super Bowl with the Rams, and then it's bounced around to a couple other teams since then, most notably the Ravens. They brought him in because they needed something on that backfield, right? It was just kind of Rock Ya-Sin back there. Nate Hobbs looked pretty good as a slot cornerback. Both of those guys got hurt. Rock Ya-Sin actually walked away, left. So they brought in Marcus Peters saying, please give us something. And then their draft, they did have the the eighth pick. Sorry, they had the eighth pick in the draft. They drafted Tyree Wilson, which we really liked. This freak human being with a huge wingspan of like 7'4" wingspan to kind of replace that pass rush that they were looking for since Khalil Mack, right? I know they have Max Crosby, and that guy's a dog. They kind of stumbled upon him, but he is clearly a left end, right? Just a pass rush. Tyree Wilson, they'll use him in dropbacks, kind of like they did Khalil Mack, put him in coverage a little bit, true outside linebacker. And then I thought I'd mention, if you've seen the last episode, I talked about him already. They did draft Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue. He's looked pretty good in 2 preseason games. Media's overhyping him. I don't know. Who knows? He may be just as good as Jimmy G. So that's something to watch. There might be a QB, battle there, because they do love to bench their franchise quarterbacks for no reasons. I just think we've said it before. If you can count on one team to constantly screw up in the season, it's going to be the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, they just repeatedly do stupid stuff. And they just can't get out of their own way. Even when they have super talented players, they just can't get out of their own way, whether it's front office mistakes, whether it's coaching mistakes, whether it's just player mistakes. They just can't get out of their own way, right? They thought that they had nailed it right with their own version of Tyreek Hill when they drafted Henry Ruggs. He ends up going to jail because he's making stupid decisions, right? They try to draft these offensive linemen. That doesn't work. Like, none of their picks are even with the team. It's just been historically bad, really. And it's just hard to come up with excuses, right? Other than the fact that they just haven't done anything good. I agree with you. They did Derek Carr dirty. Derek Carr did nothing wrong at all for that organization, and they just benched him and they sent him packing. They bring in Jimmy G. Now, listen, I'm not the biggest Jimmy G fan, but you have to state whatever team he plays for, they do win. I mean, they're not necessarily, making, obviously he doesn't have any of these Super Bowls, him as a starter, but they still win, right? He won when he was in San Francisco, obviously took them to Super Bowl. He won while he was a starter in New England. Like, the dude does win, right? But there has to be players and systems and stuff, I think, around him to go out and help him win. To do that, I don't think they have that there in Vegas. I think their offense will be okay, right? They still have Devontae Adams. I think Meyer's going to be a stud. Just found out today, apparently Josh Jacobs is going to end his holdout, so he'll be ready for week 1. So that'll be important. But their defense, right, is going to be their biggest concern. They did nothing to get better, really, on defense where they needed it. Yes, they got the pass rusher Tyree Wilson, but other than that, their defensive backfield, like as you mentioned, is just not there. And in a division where you have Mahomes, where you have Herbert, let alone a conference where you have Burrow out, like, it's just, you in the AFC, you're throwing the freaking football 30 times a game. That's just what it is in the AFC. And the Raiders just are not set up to be able to deal with that. Regardless of what their offense is going to be able to do, just their defense is not set up to be able to compete against those teams in the AFC, let alone within their division. So I struggle to see, maybe what the bright side could be for the Raiders this season. And it wouldn't surprise me if they end up, at the season or at the trade deadline. It wouldn't surprise me if a player like Adams is on the move as they try to get picks for the future, because they realize that the hole they dug themselves in is just too deep to get out of.
Yes, I agree 100%. This Raiders team, it's just like they did all of this movement, right? They released a lot of guys, traded a lot of guys, brought a lot of guys in to stay exactly the same. There was no positive. Honestly, there's really no negative from last year. All these people, it's not, they trade away Derek Carr, and I think Derek Carr is better than Jimmy G, but it's not that much, they're just equal, right? They're just stale. And it's just kind of disgusting, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, It is. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, the Raiders are going to do those things, right? Like you said before. But it's just is what it is. So, but now it's time to hit up the final team in the AFC West. Obviously, we saved the best for last. 1 second here.
What? Oh my
The
gosh.
first Super Bowl ring that has become a pendant for your viewing pleasure. We've got the Super Bowl ring for the Kansas City Chiefs defeating the Philadelphia Eagles. That is the pendant here. Obviously, it comes with the ring as well.
Look
Pops
how
off
big that is
for
on
the
your finger.
pendant. This is freaking ginormous, bro. And it's heavy too. Like this would like knock your teeth out. But gotta wrap it here for the Chiefs. Listen, I mean the Chiefs are still the Chiefs. By losing one of their best players ever, franchise history, one of the best receivers in the NFL currently, they were better. That is just unfathomable to think of whenever you lose a player like Tyreek Hill, that you can actually be better. That just goes to show you, obviously, how good Andy Reid is as a coach, but also how good Patrick Mahomes is, where really it looked like he was using Tyreek Hill as a crutch. He wasn't really going out of his way to do, look at other targets, look at other receivers besides Kelsey, to really develop and kind of do those things because he knew Tyreek Hill was going to be there. There was always those memes that was like, oh, F it, Tyreek down there somewhere, where it's just like throws it up and Tyreek Hill just magically comes down with it. We've seen that so many times to where he would just throw it, Tyreek Hill would be there like a center fielder, just track the ball, catch it, and once he just freaking cheetah, right? And so the fact that they were able, not only obviously, be better statistically on offense, Mahomes won the MVP, they won the Super Bowl, like they did not take a single step back at all. That just goes to show you how good Patrick Mahomes is and what he can do whenever you challenge him, right? The best thing to do, the worst thing to do for a defense is to challenge Mahomes to beat you another way because he's going to find it and he's going to do it. Obviously, I think the biggest kind of offseason moves is they opted not to pay Orlando Brown Jr. The season before, they had tried to pay him. He didn't want it. He bet on himself. And strangely enough, you think after winning the Super Bowl, that would be enough to maybe to get that. But they opted to, not sign him. He goes to the Bengals. And instead, they used that money to sign offensive tackle Jawan Taylor, who was right tackle for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Coming over, it was assumed that he was going to switch over and play left tackle. And then it turns out they kind of did a 180 real quick, and they ended up signing Donovan Smith, coming over from the Bucs to actually be left tackle, moving Jawan Taylor on the right tackle. So the biggest thing, right, is looking at, how is the offensive line? We saw how important the offensive line was to the Chiefs with what happened in the Super Bowl against the Bucs. Is the offensive line going to be there to, be able to protect Patrick Mahomes? So far, right, obviously, I know it's preseason, we're not overreacting, but so far, it's been fine. Mahomes hasn't been pressured. He has all the time in the world. He even mentioned it himself where he's like, I like to play preseason because I like to get that first hit. He's like, I haven't had that yet because the offensive line has kept me clean, right? So they're doing their job, which is encouraging, right? We'll see how that goes, but so far they're doing their job, so it's encouraging to see. Then on defense, right, they lose Frank Clark, who Frank Clark was, as a Chiefs fan, was one of the most frustrating players ever because during the regular season, he was like mid to below mid. Like he was just kind of there, wasn't doing anything. But then freaking the playoffs happened and he turned to Frank the Clark Shark and just dominated, right? He's like, I think second or third in like all time like playoff sacks or something like that. Like it's just absurd. Like why can't you just be that like all season? Like if you're gonna turn on the playoffs, like okay, great. I'm glad you're turning on the playoffs, but it's just frustrating to see that you have to wait 17 games before you can get this dynamic player. He leaves. He goes to the, to the division rival, the Broncos. So we'll see how that happens. As far as what else they lost, they didn't really lose that much. I mean, if we're being honest, Juju Smith-Schuster was only there on a 1-year deal anyway, and just kind of. He wasn't really anything, right, for the Chiefs. They lost safety 1 4-0 to Cleveland. He wasn't really anything either. They lost McCole Hardman to the Jets. He wasn't really anything either, although I don't blame that on him. I blame that on Andy Reid, the defense. I said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't think they did enough to really reach McCole Hardman's potential. We'll see if the Jets are able to unlock that. But they get Jerick McKinnon back, right? They make sure they keep him around. They get Richie James, who in the preseason has looked like a solid pickup from the Giants. On defense, they got Drew Tranquil from the Chargers, which we need somebody, a linebacker that can cover, because we don't have that. And they grabbed edge Charles Omenihu from the 49ers, who was pretty solid for them, right? It's hard to go when you got Nick Bosa and those guys ahead of you, but whenever he was in there, he showed flashes. So he can come in there and kind of replace Frank Clark and give us some production. The downside is he's suspended for the first 6 games, but that's just a bridge that they'll have to cross. Other than that, right, free agency, they had a really solid free agency where I don't think they lost anything more than what they were able to gain. I should say, I think we gained more than what we lost, which is always a good thing with free agency. Obviously, the biggest dark cloud looming over the Chiefs is the status of Chris Jones, who has held out of training camp, has not played a single preseason game so far. 1 preseason game left, 2 weeks to go before week 1 of the season. Is he actually going to hold out a whole season? He's going to come and play. We'll see how that kind of shakes out. So obviously keeping our eyes on that. But obviously if Chris Jones coming back, I think he will. I don't think the defense is going to be a great defense, but I think it'll be enough in order for the offense to do what their thing, right? That's the history of the Chiefs, right? Defense just has to keep them in games close enough to where Mahomes can go in and win. And even when the defense does it, Mahomes still finds a way to win 95% of the time. Obviously, we looked at their draft, right? Their first round pick and edge, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, defensive edge rusher out of Kansas State, and Rashee Rice, round pick number 55 and round 2 wide receiver at SMU, who's really kind of stole the show, right? There's a lot of talk about Justin Ross in the preseason. He's looked good, but Rashee Rice, the rookie, especially the last preseason game, preseason 2, really balled out, led the whole team in catches and yards, and it looks really promising. So I'm excited to see them kind of going after him and giving him more reps, because they really didn't do that with Sky Moore. Sky Moore never really got the touches that Rashee Rice is getting, so I'm glad to see that. I think maybe it's something that they realized that they didn't do well with Sky Moore, and so they're wanting to rectify that. So I like what they're doing there. As far as the other wide receiver goes, obviously Travis Kelce. We look at Kadarius Toney. He's injured. We can't count on him. I love Toney. We just can't count. And then we look at Richie James is coming in, like I said, Sky Moore, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. We're super young, inexperienced receiving core outside of Marquez. And then obviously Travis Kelce. There's a lot of potential there, a lot of growth. Like if the Chiefs have nailed these picks there when they're so young, they're going to set Mahomes up for success for a long period of time, right? The way he's able to do, even without a true wide receiver 1, if one of these turns out to be a legit wide receiver 1, and even if not, I still think the league is in trouble, because I don't think Mahomes is going to regress at all with these receivers. The receivers right year 2 are even going to get better and better and better as time goes on, as long as that they can stay healthy, right? They nailed it with Isaiah Pacheco, right? He's finally back healthy after a shoulder operation to clean stuff out. He's going to be ready for week 1. So I really like what the Chiefs have set up, continuing moving forward. And I don't really see too many areas of concern as of right now heading into the preseason, besides obviously, the defense, right? Is the defense going to be able to keep them in games, or is Mahomes and the offense going to have to go godlike every single game to win those games? So I think the Chiefs are set up for success, not only win the division, but also do a shot at a repeat.
Yeah, I think so too, right? The Chiefs, it's hard when you look at these teams and you see, all of the pieces moving. When you really break it down, you realize the Chiefs moving pieces for role players, right? The only one that matters is Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, in that order, right? As long as those 3 pieces, and then slowly, obviously, Kelsey's going to get phased out. I hope one day that they have someone that can come in, because I do believe Pat Mahomes, he does all of this stuff. He balls out. I believe it's because he knows on a 3rd and 5, he has a safety blanket if he needs it, right? He's okay taking a shot deep to MVS. He's okay, hitting Sky Moore on a screen pass to see if he can go something, because he knows him and Travis have that connection. I hope here pretty soon some of these picks that they've put towards that offense can progress, and in 5 years we could have maybe Rashid Rice be his safety blanket or something like that. But I don't see any reason why they couldn't, right? The only reason they couldn't would be one of these other teams, the Bengals, the Jets, the Chargers, the Jags, the Bills, right? They come up and they just have a great year and they exceed their expectations. Because I think right now, if you're marking it in, the Chiefs need to be right there for that Super Bowl title.
Yeah, I mean, we look at it, right? Did anybody get better than the Chiefs? Like any offseason moves between free agency and the draft, did anybody come up and get better than the Chiefs? And the answer really is no. And obviously, it's not to say, obviously things happen, right? Injuries happen, or sometimes, you just lose a game, right? You're not going to win all the games. So sometimes it happens in the regular season, sometimes it happens in the playoffs. So it's not to say, that there's not going to be competition. It's going to be easy for the Chiefs at all by any means. But it's just, it's hard whenever, like I said before, whenever, you look at the other teams where there's clear cut, quarterback, wide receiver one, clear cut, good defense, solid defenses. And you look at the Chiefs where it's like they don't have that. They don't have the clear cut wide receiver. They don't have the stud defense. They don't have all these things yet. They're winning the division every single year, and they're in the AFC Championship game every single year. And they find ways to win, and that's just what they're going to do. They're just going to win games. I don't foresee that stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree.
But let's go ahead and we've talked long enough. That was our individual breakdown there of the AFC West. Let's go ahead and give us our final predictions here, Chase. So tell me, at the end of the season, how are the AFC West teams going to rank?
Absolutely. We'll start at the top because I think this one's pretty easy to start there. Number one, we've got the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Reigning Super Bowl. They've won it. Pat Mahomes has never not lost it. I don't see that happening this year. He's winning. Number two, we have the Chargers, and I think this is kind of like they did last year. This is a playoff spot. They're just not going to win it because the Chiefs are so good, right? If it any other division, I think they could potentially win this one. They're sitting at 2. Number 3, I have the Raiders. I believe that even with all the bland movement and the disgusting staleness, I think they stayed stale. They finished 3rd last year. They'll finish 3rd this year. Number 4, I don't buy into Russell Wilson. I don't buy into Sean Payton at all. I'm putting the Broncos last. That defense is great. Defense wins championships. Yeah, well, scoring touchdowns win games.
Nice. So similar, obviously, won't mix too much words. So I've got the Chiefs at number 1. Chargers at number 2, both of those for the same reasons. Then where we differ is I've got the Broncos at 3 and the Raiders at 4. And honestly, for me, it just comes down to the defense, right? I get what you're saying, right? I like that phrase, actually. Did you coin that? Because that was pretty good. You should probably trademark that, like coin, like tweet it out after this, like that way it's like cemented, like in like social history. That was really good. Or I guess you have to exit. Are they X's now? They're not tweets anymore, right?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Can't be tweet. Exit.
Exit.
But that defense is so freaking good. And I think Russell Wilson is just going to have to be a little bit better than he was last year, which I think can happen. I think he can be better than he was last year. I'm not going to say it's going to be world changing, right? They're still going to finish 3rd in the division, but he just needs to be better than last year. And I think that's what's going to make the difference between the Broncos and the Raiders is the fact that the Raiders defense, I think, is trash. I don't think it's going to do well at all. And that the Broncos defense is going to be able to win those games. And so that's kind of how those standings. So Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, and Raiders.
Yeah, I could see that. The sad part is those bottom 2, it really doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
The division's too hard. The conference is too hard. Those 2 teams are just down there, hoping for next year already.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the AFC West and if you finish, obviously if you finish last in the division, you're not making a playoff. But if you're finishing 3rd, like there's no way you're sneaking in. Like, in the NFC, you can get away with, like what happened with the NFC East, right? The top 3 teams made the playoffs. I can get away with that in the NFC East just because the competition is so low. That's not going to happen in the AFC, right? There's some real competition in the AFC. We've talked about the AFC North. We've talked about the AFC East, right? Those are super tough, super tough divisions where, I mean, it's possible one of those divisions can put in 3 teams, let alone 2. So those are the only divisions where if you finish 3, there's even a chance. But definitely if you're in the AFC West, if you finish 3 or lower, you're definitely out. But there's our breakdown there for the AFC West. Let us know in the comments your thoughts about the breakdown there of your team. What did we miss? What did we get right? Let us know if those final standings are correct. Are the Chiefs going to repeat? Or maybe is this the Chargers the year where they finally don't charger and they can come out on top? Let us know in the comments. Make sure you check out the rest of our division breakdown series, and we'll catch you next time here on All Things Football.